Hello, I'm Bernard Hickey from interest.co.nz and welcome to an economic weather report brought to you in association with Bank of New Zealand. Today we're going to look at how New Zealand will pay to rebuild Christchurch. Now it's early days yet on the actual cost of the earthquake, but some people have started to come up with estimates and we've got a general idea of how much will be paid for by insurance and how much we'll have to pay for out of the government's coffers. John Key reckons that the last two earthquakes, September 4 and February 22nd, are likely to cost around about $20 billion. Now he reckons that insurance, both government insurance through the EQC and private insurance, will account for about $15 billion of that $20 billion of spending required. The problem is, how do we pay for the remaining $5 billion over the next couple of years? Do we borrow the money from the rest of the world? We could do that. The government could borrow money, and at the moment the rest of the world seem keen to lend us money. Interest rates are relatively low, and all around the world right now, because of the dramas in Europe and in the Middle East, people are putting their money into treasury bonds or government bonds in many countries. Apart from, of course, those countries in Europe, the pigs as we call them, Portugal, Ireland, Greece and Spain, where interest rates there are rising to the level where we hit some sort of Minsky moment. When I talk about a Minsky moment, I'm talking about the point where interest rates are so high that you can't get out of your debt. You're into a debt spiral. Now New Zealand's not in that position yet, and the government's debt, net debt, as a percentage of GDP is only forecast to double or so to about 28% in the next 3 or 4 years. Now that seems relatively low. The problem for New Zealand is that our entire net foreign debt is relatively high, at around about 90% of GDP. And the problem for us is that Standard & Poor's is currently reviewing not just the nation's credit rating, but also the credit rating of the banks who hold most of that debt. The risk here is that over the next few years, the government could choose to borrow that extra $5 billion, or however much it is, and that in coming years, the interest costs on that debt really starts to rise. And we're essentially transferring the cost of fixing Christchurch onto future generations, just at a time when the spending on pensions and healthcare is expected to rise. The question is, do we put off paying for the cost of rebuilding Christchurch and to an extent the national economy by borrowing from the rest of the world, or do we decide that now is the time to take the pain? Now is the time to reduce our consumption, to save more, and to reinvest in infrastructure, obviously in Christchurch, but elsewhere as well, including investing in schools and broadband and the likes. That's the question for New Zealand. Do we take on extra risk, borrow offshore, and potentially put the cost onto future generations, or do we pay for it now? Now, my view is that an earthquake levy is the best way to do this. A temporary increase in taxes on those who can afford it most. The Greens have proposed a levy of 1% for those earning between $48,000 and $70,000 and 2% on those earning more than $70,000. And of course, that levy would not be imposed on those people living in Christchurch. Now that's a real question for the government to address. The government itself says it doesn't want to impose a Christchurch earthquake levy, but that it may do it. Over the next 2 to 3 months, the government will make that decision. The budget is on May 19, and we'll see how that goes then. But for now, some very tough choices confront not just the nation, but also those people in the government itself. I'm Bernard Hickey. That was a special economic weather report brought to you in association with Bank of New Zealand.